was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie, please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom! Boom! I hear and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose. Hello, I'm Penny St., and I'm the host of Peace with Penny. Welcome. Today we're going to speak with Kher Albaz, the chairman of the Arab Jewish Center for Empowerment, Equality, and Cooperation, Negev Institute for Strategies of Peace and Economic Development, or AJEEC NISPED, an Arab Jewish peace organization. Kher is a board member in many organizations, as well as being an appointed member of several governmental policy development committees. He has a BA in social work from Ben Gurion University of the Negev, an MA in social planning and policy from WLU University in Canada, and an MBA from the University of Haifa. As the co-executive director of AJEEC NISPED, his work focuses on creating a world where everyone is accepted and can live in dignity. AJEEC NISPED is a large organization with a $4 million annual budget and has a wide range of projects and has been working diligently on peace between Jews, Arabs, and Bedouins for over 15 years. They've also worked to help many developing countries worldwide train young leaders in Africa, Haiti, the Palestinian Authority, Jordan, and more. They have had 250 volunteer year programs, have 1,500 volunteers aged 13 to 25, and they have 5,000 members in their youth organization. We'll concentrate on their work in Israel between Arab-Jewish partnerships, especially with the Bedouin community. Did you know that Bedouins are also citizens of Israel? However, they're also some of the poorest people in the country due to many factors that we'll discuss, not least of which having to change from a nomadic culture to a westernized civilian structure. Change of any type is always difficult, but such an extreme cultural change for an entire group of people take lots of time and effort. Jewish Israelis and Bedouins working together within Israel is one way to work on peace. So let's get started. Welcome, Kher. Why don't we begin with asking some personal questions?
Hi, how are you doing? Thanks for your kind invitation. Go ahead, please.
So great to see you again. You live in Tel Shiva, a Bedouin town, and are the married father of 7 children. Can you tell us about your life and where you live?
First of all, hi, and again, I live in Tel Shiva, which is a Bedouin town, actually about, I would say, less than 9 miles east of Beersheba, city of Beersheba. So when you talked about the war and your experience, it's in the area that I live in, and we unfortunately are exposed to the same experiences once every while. Tel Sheva is the first Bedouin town to be recognized by the government. It was built in 1968. And up to that time, Bedouins used to live in what we call the tribes, Bedouin tribes. Most of the towns in the Bedouin community until recent years were not recognized. And the meaning is that when the town is being recognized, it means that it gets services like electricity, running water. It's a modern town. And so we have 7 towns such Tel Sheva, and we have about, I would say, 27, 28 unrecognized towns where Bedouins are still living. There are, and I will try not to go into very specific details, but there are about 11 towns that were newly recognized and being built as we speak.
Wow. So although Tel Sheva is so poor, it's juxtaposed against one of the richest cities in Israel, only a mile and a half away. Can you talk about some of the issues that causes?
Yes, actually, Penny, you're touching on one of the most sensitive issues that we're dealing with right now. The Bedouin community, and because of what you described earlier, moving from a traditional way of life based on, I would say, traditional economy, where people used to live in a very simple way of life with minimum basic needs. Bedouins, known as people who lived in the desert for many years, lived in tents. They had their own sheep and goats. They used to have very sort of simple food. They would actually produce their food on themselves. They were self-sufficient as an economic units. And then they moved in a very short period of time. They moved into this modern Israeli society in a way without getting any proper preparation for that. So that the impact of that was that the Bedouins moved from being producers into consumers in the state of Israel, and thus became very poor because, see, they were not prepared for the modern employment market. Most of the people in some of these towns are unemployed, and the family income is actually very low. So poverty in these towns became very evident. And based on statistics,
sorry, what time period was this over? Was this from 1948? Or
yeah, after the establishment of the state of Israel, Bedouins used to live in wide areas here, and they would move from one place to another looking for water and grass. And then the state of Israel was established in 1948. But I would say 10 years later, they became part of the system. After the military ruling ended, they became part of the sort of Israeli system, economic system. But they were not prepared to go and become a very active part of it, because of what I described earlier. And now, if we're looking at the situation in recent years based on formal statistics, we're getting from the Social Security in Israel, every second family in this community is under the line of poverty, which is a situation that we cannot live any longer with it. Because, see, the impact of poverty, as you know, not just here, every place in the world, the impact of poverty on the community itself is so severe. You would see, very negative behaviors developing as a result of poverty. You see kids living in a very poor conditions and thus growing to be, unsuccessful and find it very difficult to integrate themselves into the society, the general society. And therefore, the results that we see now is that for instance, the health situation in the Bedouin community is very bad. For instance, the crime rates are increasing every day because people are looking for income and they cannot find it, so they look for, I would say, illegal ways of getting income, and therefore the young people are getting involved in more and more in illegal activities. And we can name many examples of the negative impact of this situation on the community itself. And of course, if the community is in such, I would say, difficult situation, that also impacts on the general public. The Negev, the region that I live in, which is the southern side of Israel, Bedouins are 20% of the total population of the Negev. The other 80% are from the Jewish community. And if you live side by side with such a poor, indigenous, and communities, you are impacted as well as a majority. And you mentioned the fact that Tel Sheva is just less than a half mile from the richest town in Israel, Omer. And you can see that the richest is living nearby the poorest. And that situation is not healthy. That can create a lot of tension and a lot of problems. So what we're trying to do is to, first of all, to deal with this gap, to close these gaps as much as possible, and create the situation where we can, make sure that these communities live in a real shared space, a real society, a shared society. Because you cannot expect, not just here, everywhere, you cannot expect communities with such huge gaps to be able to live in one space as a shared space. That's something that we need to deal with. And as I always say, shared space and shared society cannot build their own. We must do the work to build these shared spaces. We must do the work to create the shared society, because see, there are Jewish here and there are Arabs here, and nobody is going anywhere. So
Yes.
our job is to create a situation, is to create a platform where people can know how to live together, to respect each other, to respect each other's fears and hopes, concerns, and everything else, rather than just ignoring each other and creating a lot of problems.
Yes, that's one of the issues throughout Israel, really, that there's the Arabs and Jews, and in this case also the Bedouins, live town to town next to each other, and they stay separate, and they don't talk, although many do work within Jewish towns, but as socially that they stay separate. And also the language barrier, the fact that Israelis speak Hebrew and Arabs or Bedouins will speak Arabic, and that's also another huge factor. Did you want to mention that and anything that you're doing about that?
Yeah, see, in Israel, the official language is Hebrew, but the level of education in the Bedouin community, for instance, and I think in the Arab population in general, is very low compared to the education systems on the Jewish communities. But see, when they finish high school, which is separate systems, they meet in colleges and universities. So the young Bedouins, for instance, are expected to go to universities and colleges knowing Hebrew, and of course, with a good quality of education that will allow them to survive there. And that doesn't happen. And let me just give you a couple of figures here. We are talking about an average of 7,000 young people reach out up to the age of 18 every year in the Bedouin community, which is more or less about 300,000 people living in the south. That's the total size of the Bedouin community in Israel, and the southern side of Israel. So we're talking about 7,000 young people getting up to the age of 18 every year. Out of the 7,000, 10% are able to access higher education on a yearly basis. And can you imagine that we are 700 out of 7,000 are having the opportunity to go and get higher education in a state where education is very, very, very important. Israel is considered to be putting a lot of emphasis on education. It's a startup nation. And in order for my son or my brother to compete with a young Jewish person their age during being at the universities and colleges, they would have to have sort of a similar background in terms of their higher education, in terms of their high school education or elementary education. And that's not the case. So the result is that most of the young people in the Bedouin community are not able to access higher education at universities and colleges because of their low quality. And therefore, we're seeing that the unemployment rate there, and in Israel, if you need to find a decent job, you need to have a higher education. So therefore, we're seeing that within the Bedouin young people groups, the unemployment rates are very, very, very high. And that's the result of that, is that they're not able to integrate themselves into the system. Education and then finding the proper job. And I think one of the aims, one of the ways that we're trying to solve this problem is to create what we call the gap year projects, is by allowing the young people to be in some sort of a preparation year that will prepare them from moving from high school to universities and colleges and survive there, finish their higher education, and then helping them finding jobs. That's the way to deal with closing the gaps. We don't have other ways of doing that. And it was proven, wherever you give the young people the opportunity, wherever the young people get the opportunity to being prepared to higher education, they are successful. And we see some success cases here. But still, we're moving the sea with a spoon. The numbers are very big, and NGOs like AJEEC NISPED and others are working with smaller groups of people who don't have the means to cover all bases. So what we're trying to do is to change the government policies in terms of investment, to put more resources into training these young people, to giving them some support that they need in order for them to gain higher education and jobs.
Well, you certainly are an example of what can happen when you do get the education, because you certainly are the convinced, as you are so educated, and your personal story is something that is just fascinating, and you kind of lived what you're trying to do as an organization, and that you were helped by many Jewish folks along the way. Can you at least touch on your story, because it's fascinating?
Well, thank you, but usually it's easier for me to talk about others than myself, but I'll try, because you asked.
It's something. It's something, but it just it reminds me how sometimes in life we have kind of little clips, we just don't know it, that it's going to be replayed later in our life. So
Yes.
So today you work on perhaps the help that you were given earlier. So can you talk about that?
Yes. Well, let's start with saying that I was born as a Bedouin kid. I was born in a Bedouin tribe, not far away from where I live now. And I was born in a tent, and I had to go through the process that young Bedouin kids at that time went through, being there, helping the family, raising, helping with herding the sheep and doing all the jobs that young Bedouin was expected to do. And then moving from there, we moved to the permanent town of Tel Sheva when I was in the high school, when I was in grade 11. So that was moving from being in a tent and having to go through a formal education system at that time, it was almost impossible mission. But it seems that I was lucky enough to survive that with very small numbers of people, young people my age at that time.
And excuse me, your parents also just had, your mother wasn't educated, and your father had a second grade education, I believe?
Yes. My mother actually never went to school. My father actually went to until grade 2. And he is self-educated. He learned on his own how to read and write. My mother actually never had the chance. But they valued education very much, because they knew that the way to get out of poverty is by education. So at that point of time, they were supportive in the sense of go do whatever needed to be done, and they didn't know exactly what does that mean. So when I finished high school, I started like many other, or most of the young people my age at that time. I wanted to work, and I started working, doing some simple jobs here and there just to help supporting the family. But I still felt the need to do something new, something that none of my colleagues at that time, my friends at that time, or the people living in my surroundings actually tried to do. So I went after 3 years of work, and then I got married at that time, and I decided I'll jump in and try to go to the university. And I think at that time, when I think about it now, I know that the motivation was to do my utmost for my brothers. I'm the oldest in my family of my brothers and sisters. So just to make sure that my brothers and sisters don't have to go through what I went through. So I decided to go and the School of Social Work. That's when I started my schooling. I finished my first degree in social work with the aim of doing something about the situation, of changing this reality and not accepting life as is, not accepting the destiny that was, forced upon us, not to accept it, to change it. In other words, I wanted to create a new future and not to accept the almost certain future for Bedouin kids. And there, I started doing what I'm doing, and we're doing a lot of, putting a lot of effort into this. At that time, there were not many Bedouin students, so we didn't get any scholarships, for instance, because nobody knew what that means. Being a Bedouin in a university with very, very high majority of Jewish students. On my school, I was the only Bedouin at that time. So I had to work. I had to support my family. I had a wife and 2 kids at that time. I had to work and support my family. I never got actually one single dime through my BA studies. I had to, provide for myself and for my family. So I worked and studied at the same time. I was a bus driver during the day, studying at the university, and then during the night I would be, I work as a cab driver, and just to make sure that my, getting enough money to cover all the expenses. And I think the turning point was that throughout the first degree in social work at the University of Ben Gurion, I was lucky enough to meet with the right people. I was lucky enough to meet with the person who actually was the head of the School of Social Work at that time, Dr. Benny Gidron, who's from the Jewish community. And we became, he was very interested in what's going on in my life and with my family, and he became a friend of my family, and other staff members there. All of them are Jewish, and they decided to, I think when I think about it now, they decided to see this person being successful, this project to be, complete successfully. And they started helping. And when I finished my first degree, Benny Gidron was Dr. Benny Gidron was the person who actually encouraged me to go to Canada for my master's degree, along with my family. That was the first, I think we were the first Bedouin family ever to do that. And it was a challenge. My wife is Bedouin, myself is Bedouin. My English at that time was, 50-50, I would say. And I had to go through the experience with 2 kids. And that's how with the support of Benny, I was able to go and do that. And I got a scholarship there, and the rest of it is history. And then 92, end of 92, I came back here with a master's degree in social planning and policy. And my first mission was to develop social services for Bedouins. And I thought that was the best opportunity that I've ever had in my life, is basically helping my community to be more, I would say, resilient, to become a little bit more empowered, and to be able to become a sort of a bridge, if I can say so, between the system, which is a Western system, and my community, which is a traditional Eastern community that just moved from being, traditional Bedouins living in tribes into this modern kind of way of life. That was the mission, and that was the mission that I had most of my professional life. I started social services. I directed the social services for more than 25 years, and then about 10 years ago, I said, to myself, I had enough of being an official. After I had, major successes there, thank God. And I moved to the civil society organization, AJEEC NISPED, basically doing things that I couldn't do as an official. And that's what I'm doing right now, is fulfilling some of my sort of dreams. The idea here is to believe in what we're doing. And I always say it, I'm so lucky because I'm getting paid sometimes for things that I love doing. And I wish that for everybody, because then what motivates you to change is things that you believe in. And that's wonderful. This is a blessing as far as I'm concerned. And the business of creating a new future and not accepting the almost sort of certain and determined future is something that I really, really enjoy doing. And I'm lucky. I have some good partners too, that I'm working with, and that's great.
Yeah, all of the top folks looking at the bios, everyone is so educated and also has worked and continues to work in so many well-respected organizations in the working together with Arabs and Jews, and as I interview so many in this work, and I'll find one person, and now wait a minute, they're working also with this organization, etc. It begins to feel like a small subset as well, getting to see these incredible, I call you all angels on earth, because what you do is, it's difficult. It's difficult. It's really difficult, first of all, even to know, just as people, how we feel about something. But then when you are doing so much with conflict resolution and listening to the other's narrative is really hard.
Yes.
And it's not to say that you should be changing your beliefs to theirs, but to understand and to work on peace, you have to know how the other person thinks. And often it's very different from how you believe, and it's hard to hear, and it's hard to hear these stories. I love Israel and I love being Jewish, but doesn't mean that everything that any of us do is kind or just for the other person. And it's really hard to hear. It's really hard to hear.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what we're trying to do, basically, is when we work with young people from both communities, from the Jewish and from the Arab communities, is that first of all, they would have to take responsibility for changing their realities. We use this sign usually. When I'm pointing a finger towards you, there are three fingers that are pointed towards me. What's my role in changing this difficult reality?
Oh, that's beautiful.
So, and we do that with all our young people that we're working with. And now we're working with more than 500 on the gap years, and with about 1,500 volunteers. And we have a fastly growing youth movement organization with, now you said 5,000, now it's about 6,000, and we're growing. And every few months we add some more.
And keep up with your stats.
Yes,
you're growing so quickly.
Well, I think what we're planning to do is within 3 years to have 10,000 kids that are actually accessing the service. And we're also hoping, because see, we're changing reality also by action, by doing things, and by developing models. One of our models is now, hopefully, or two at least, will be accepted by the government very soon. The gap year would be accepted by the government, and then we can move from providing services to 500 or providing support to 500 young people to providing support to 3,000 or 5,000 young people on a yearly basis. And that's a changing mechanism. That's a changing mechanism for in our realities. and that will allow us to reach out to as many young people as possible. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think what we need to do is focus on, see, it's not enough just to help people close gaps, but also we need to start building the shared society, the shared space. You said it earlier that we have many shared spaces here in Israel. We have the colleges and universities as shared spaces. We have the shopping malls as the shared spaces. My town is less than 10 miles east of Beersheba. Most of our life, daily life, is spent in Beersheba, which is a Jewish town, city, okay? And so I do my shoppings in Beersheba. My family is actually having fun in Beersheba for recreational activities and parks, or whatever the case is. So our presence on the city is on a daily basis. So we have the shopping malls, we have the factories, we have the businesses where people work together, we have colleges and universities, we have a lot of shared spaces. However, people don't live in this shared space together. They just cross by each other, you know. And our aim now is to build a real shared society. That doesn't mean they would have to live in the same houses and fall in love with each other, but they would have to relate and understand and get to know each other, not through stereotypes, and not through media, or not through stories that we heard about this side or the other side, but being in a direct interaction, getting people to work together around mutual interests. Health is an interest of both Bedouins and Jews in the South. Economic development is an interest of both. It's a shared interest. Education is a shared interest. Okay, dealing with the environment. When the environment is bad, it's bad for everybody. So our belief is that 80% of the issues are shared issues. 20% are issues on conflict. So what we're saying, let's try and focus our efforts into creating this working together environment on the 80%, and that's a lot. And we believe that by doing that, people will do what you just said earlier. They would relate to each other, they would listen to each other, they would know more about the other's fears and concerns and hopes. Jewish people who live in Beersheba also have some fears and concerns. And in order to show some empathy, I would need to know these fears and concerns. They would need to know how I live here in my town and in what conditions. They would, people, the majority, the Jewish majority, would have to know about the daily suffering of these poor communities and what they go through, and how difficult for them to access jobs and access resources and whatever the case is. And then by creating this sort of mutual understanding, then we'll create more opportunities for them to change realities together. We are thinking all the time by using the terms of win-win rather than win-lose. If people here work together, they will both benefit, and that's a win-win. But if people work against each other, that's a win-lose. Even if one side wins, the other side loses, and that's not good. Okay. Yeah. So what we are hoping to do is always to find ways to create this win-win. Yes, there are political issues. We're not naive. There are some issues that are actually in conflict, and we are not naive. We know that, but we're saying that there are so many things that are in common that impact the lives of all sides. Let's find those and deal with those, and by doing that, we will get to a situation that people will start relating to each other as human beings, not as Jews and Arabs, but rather as human beings, and that's the shared space, the real shared space, or the real shared society that we're thinking of developing. That's what keeps me actually very busy in recent months, because see, if we don't do that, we will end up going through the events that we had last May, and I'm sure that you and your audience actually heard about that. There were some major clashes between the communities in the mixed cities and in the Negev and other areas. And I think one of the reasons, and I assessed that, I learned in depth what happened at that time. I think one of the major issues, or one of the major reasons that we had these clashes, and not just the political reasons, and they impacted on things, but the major reasons were the huge gap between the communities, the lack of hope that some of or parts of these communities are not having for a better future. This lack of hope created the tension, and this lack of hope created this sort of people got far away from each other. This gap was growing and growing, and I think our lesson that we learned from the May events, that everybody suffered from them. The majority as well as the minority, we all suffered from these events. So our lesson is how to change this reality to a reality that when the time comes and there's a conflict, the majority will protect this shared space and not go against it. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do now, is to change reality that people can identify mutual interests, focus on these mutual interests, and do a lot more work together rather than separate.
Well, before we go further, I'd like to play a brief clip about AJEEC NISPED. It has some history of the organization, shows a taste of some of their projects. It's not all in English, so for some of it, you'll have to read the subtitles, but you'll get an idea of the fantastic work that is going on between the Jews and the Arabs and Bedouins in the region. Some awards they've won for their work, and then we'll talk about their programs more in detail. But
in AJEEC, we work to close gap between the communities, create equality, and build partnership. We work with the Arab Bedouin communities in Israel. We work with population all around the country and with communities around the world.
החזון של AJEEC הוא בעצם לייצר עתיד חדש שבו כל אדם, צעיר ומבוגר, ימצא את ההזדמנות השווה לייצר את השינוי, לחיות בכבוד, לקבל את זהותו ולקבל את הזהות של האחר.
The Negev Institute for Strategies of Peace and Development was founded in 1998. In 2002, Amal founded AJEEC, the Arab Jewish Center for Equality, Empowerment and Cooperation.
In 2003, we started the Bedouin Volunteer Center for teaching informal education.
In 2004, we were fortunate to get a very small grant that gave us the opportunity to start an early childhood program.
In 2005, we started the Economic Development Department.
In 2005, the formal name of the organization also changed so that we are now known as AJEEC NISPED. In 2010, we expanded our program even further, the community health program.
In 2015, the Ministry of Education recognized Shabibat AJEEC as the first and only youth organization in the Arab society in Israel.
אז זכינו למספר פרסים. זכינו גם לפרס אוניברסיטת בן גוריון, וזכינו גם לפרסים מקומיים, אבל השיא היה בעצם כשב-2016 זכינו בפרס נשיא המדינה. בשנת 2017, תוכנית ברידג'טק, שהיא בעצם תוכנית הכשרת צעירים לעולם ההייטק, הוכרה על ידי משרד החינוך כמכינה מוכרת, ובעצם מאז אנחנו כבר מפעילים את התוכנית לשנה השלישית ברציפות. אנחנו בעצם עוסקים במספר רחב מאוד של תחומים. בתחום החינוך אנחנו עוסקים במגוון מאוד רחב של פעילויות, שאם אני אזכיר כמה מתוכם, אז יש לנו את שנת קהילה של התנדבות, יש לנו את ארגון הנוער שביבת AJEEC, יש לנו את הורים כשותפים, ויש לנו את ברידג'טק. בתחום הבריאות וחוסן קהילתי אנחנו מדברים על מגוון רחב מאוד, שוב, של פעילויות, שכולל שירותי אמבולנס בכפרים לא בלתי מוכרים, צוות חוסן קהילתי, הכשרת חובשים, קבוצות תמיכה למלחמות בסרטן השד. תחומי תעסוקה ועסקים חברתיים אנחנו עוסקים גם במגוון מאוד רחב של תחומים. נשים רוקמות חלום למשל, היא הכשרת נשים למציאת מקורות פרנסה. אחד הפרויקטים הייחודיים שלנו בעצם ב-AJEEC מכון הנגב היא הפרויקט שנקרא שנת קהילה, כאשר אנחנו מפגישים מתנדבים צעירים מהחברה היהודית עם מתנדבים צעירים מהחברה הערבית, והם עובדים בזוגות. הפרויקט הזה בעצם נותן הזדמנות לצעירים להיחשף לתרבות האחר לאורך בעצם שנה שלמה. והכוונה שלנו בעתיד היא להתחיל דווקא מגיל הגן, להפגיש את הקבוצות של ילדים מגיל הגן ועד סיום בית הספר התיכון, כאשר לילדים תהיה הזדמנות לפגוש את האחר לאורך כל תקופת הלימודים שלהם.
We are a joint team of 200 employees and 1,500 volunteers, working together to reach out to more than 30,000 people every year. As Jewish Israelis, we are not working for the Bedouin community, we are working with the Bedouin communities in equality and partnership.
התקציב השנתי של אג'יק היום הוא עומד על כ$4 מיליון, שבעצם באו לכסות גם את הפעילות אבל גם את העבודה והשכר העבודה של כ-200 עובדים בתוך הארגון בשכר וכ-1,500 מתנדבים במהלך השנה. החלוקת התקציב היא בעצם באה למזער את הסיכון, והחלטנו ש50% מהתקציב יגיע מפילנתרופיה, 25% יגיע ממשרדי ממשלה ו-25% יגיע ממקורות תקציביים שלנו, כמו העסקים החברתיים שהזכרנו מקודם. עיקר התקציב באג'יק הוא בעצם הולך להפעלות, לפרויקטים ותקציבי פעולה.
אני חושבת שהאימפקט הכי גדול זה שהם יוצאים עם מודעות חברתית וסביבתית הרבה יותר רגישה. הם מודעים לאיפה הם נמצאים. וגם אנחנו רואים בסוף השנה, כשהם מתחילים להיפגש, איך הם מתנהגים א' ואיך הם מסיימים ב'. כלומר, כל הדבר הזה מתחיל ככה לרקום עור וגידים.
אני חושב ארגון מחברה אזרחית כמו אג'יק יכול לשנות בצורה דרמטית גם את התדמית ואת היכולת של החברה הבדואית.
As Jews, we believe in our responsibility for tikkun olam, repairing the world. And tikkun olam begins with your closest neighbors. In AJEEC, we dream, we innovate, and we implement, together, Jews and Arabs, for a better future for Israel as a whole.
The short video was actually, we're trying to show that in order to create real peace, you need to close gaps. You cannot expect communities with such huge differences to live in peace. You need to make sure that there are some common ground, that people, some similarities. It needs to be another way of distributing the resources that will impact positively in everybody. And that's what we're trying to do in this organization. By the way, the meaning of the word AJEEC means that I come towards you as a sign of opening, our arms and hearts towards the other and understanding the other. And I think what we're trying to do in AJEEC is by also sometimes, because see, we notice that sometimes there's a lack of knowledge as how to approach small minorities. So we develop models based on basic local needs. And we also develop these models not, as my partner said, not for the people, but with the people. So they know their realities. They know what they need and they know how to meet these needs. And all we actually become is a resource for these communities to become more resilient. And I think by using these models, government offices are also very positive in terms of adopting some of these models, because it's grassroots models and it's working, okay? And therefore, I think what was mentioned there is that we, first of all, we're not there to replace the government. It's very, very important to convey this message, not just to the government offices only, but to also to the communities. The government is in charge of the welfare of the people. Israel is a welfare state, and the government is in charge of the welfare of these people as citizens. Bedouins are Israeli citizens. What we do is actually by showing the government offices that it's possible, we can reach out to any community and we can develop the services there, and it's possible. And you know what? I think sometimes it's even cheaper, in terms of cost benefits. It's even cheaper than providing services other places, because there's a sort of the needs there are a little bit more basic. And I think by what people would like to enjoy successes, and when government officials see that there's a very fair chance for successes, they jump in as well. And that's how we change realities, is by showing that it's possible, it's positive, And it's good for the people, and it's good for the state, you know. Happy people, happy state. Sad people, sad state. That's our theme, basically.
Well, speaking of happy, you've won a number of awards for your work. Can you speak a little bit about that? That sounded terrific.
You know, awards are a side effect, a nice side effect of what we're doing.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it's very important for us because it gives us some sort of a sense of support by the formal system. We got awards from the University of Ben Gurion. We got awards from the different sort of organizations here. We got some awards from media. But as it was mentioned in the short video, the highest one we got the award from the President of Israel as a very sort of important organization that actually are building shared space. And that message is so important for us. Gave us a lot of energy into continuing what we're doing, because see, we're operating on the comfort zone. We got a lot of criticism from different sides. You know, we get criticism from the right-wing politicians, you know, that don't like to see shared space being built. We get a lot of criticism from the local communities sometimes that we're changing their way of life a bit, you know, by introducing higher education, by getting these young generations to go out and take responsibility and change their realities. That's, as you said it at the beginning, every change sometimes creates resistance. And we are in the business of change. We are change. Yeah. And we are not operating on the comfort zone. So therefore, when we get these awards, that gives us a lot of sort of positive energy to continue. A couple of years ago, we got the awards of an influential, that was actually the award, I got the award, but I represent an organization, one of the highly influential people on the south, in southern Israel. And I got the award directly from the Prime Minister and from the minister at that time, Derei. And for us, it wasn't just a piece of paper. It's saying that the state of Israel is supporting the fact that minorities are to be included in the system, and the educational systems and the economic development systems, on the employment market, and every other system that actually increases the resilience of people, increasing the empowerment of people. And that's something that's very important. So to this, you know, long answer to a very short question, the awards are very good in the sense that we are conveying a message through these awards to both, to the community and to the officials as well.
Well, Mazel Tov.
Thank you.
The name of your organization, I would imagine, because it's really kind of alphabet soup, and it represents two organizations that ultimately were brought together. Can you talk a little bit about your history so people get an idea what is a AJEEC or a NISPED? What are those two things?
Yeah, and I think we touched on that on the short video, but I'll just explain a little bit more. Our founder, Dr. Yehuda Paz, late Dr. Yehuda Paz, he believed and his wife Ruth as well, they believed on world peace. And they thought that if we are to create a platform where people can come from different countries to this region here, to this country here, to this area here, and learn from our successes in terms of cooperatives and all the whole kibbutzi movement and the whole economic development and community development projects that are actually were developed in Israel. If we are able to do that, that will help people to learn here, go back to their countries, and develop their economy and communities. And that will be one of the ways of creating this world peace, okay? And at that time, they were looking for people that speak more than one language. I worked with them at that time as a volunteer because I was directing social services, but in my free time, I worked with them as a volunteer because I speak 3 languages, and they had people coming from different areas, from the Palestinian Authority areas, from Jordan, from other developing countries in Africa, and of course local groups. So we need 3 languages, the English, the Arabic, and the Hebrew. So, and so at that time, they were looking for people who spoke these languages. And they actually, at the beginning of their activities, and around the 2000 events, the 2000 events in the Arab community, there was a major clashes between the police forces and the Arab community up north, and 12 people were killed at that time. And the tension here was very, very high. So they started looking, investing a little bit more on the local arena. They were introduced to one of the Bedouin female leaders at that time, a young social worker by the name of Amal Al-Hajouj. And so they asked her to come and help. And she, after a very short while, she said, you know what, you go and help people from developing countries and from faraway places. I would like to focus on our front yard, not backyard, but front yard, the Bedouin community, as a poorest community in Israel. And that's how the idea of helping the local community started by Amal and her partner Vivian Silver, whom you saw in the video. And they started helping by providing some very basic need to increase the to empower the local communities. So they would work a little bit with early childhood, with helping women to find jobs and etc. And that was the project at that time was called AJEEC. And so in a very short period of time, donors started identifying this as a more important issue to invest in than investing in international activities. Mm-hmm. And in a very short while, AJEEC, the project, became so large that we had to change names. The organization at that time was called NISPED. So we called it AJEEC NISPED, and that's when we merged the two organizations. And we're still operating locally, but also operating internationally. So now AJEEC is providing services to the Bedouin community where we started, but it also provides services to the Arab population in Israel in general, as well as the mixed cities in Israel, Jews and Arabs, like Lod, Ramle, Yaffo, hopefully next year, Akko, Haifa, where you visited at that time, and other places. So our aim is to be wherever people meet from different communities and create these shared space in all these places, not just in the south, but also central and northern Israel, wherever we can reach out. And nowadays, we are operating in more than 14, 15 major Arab towns and cities in central and northern Israel. We're operating on the mixed cities in Israel, on the ones that I mentioned. And we're also operating in the Negev, plus some projects in developing countries. Now, it's very important for me to say, because most of your audience probably will be Americans, most of our financial support are coming from either Jewish federations or funds in the States. And Jewish federations and funds are very some of them are very generous towards what we believe in. They're helping us creating this new future or better future for all of us here, because they believe that by creating this better future, that will also not just provide empowerment to the local communities, but also it will strengthen the state of Israel as a more human, a more open, a more developed, a more whatever the terms that you can use, state, rather than becoming a state where the minorities are very excluded, and doing vice versa, including everybody into the system, and that will impact positively in the state as a state. Okay, so this is the opportunity also to thank all these very generous partners that we have in the States. And by the way, the majority of our funds, philanthropy is coming from there, but we also have partners in Europe and some of the European countries and some other places.
Awesome. Now, AJEEC NISPED concentrates in the areas of health, educational programs, employment and economic development, and Arab-Jewish partnerships. And we'll talk about each, but can you talk about some of your health and wellness programs?
Yeah, and I think what the fact that we are spread all over the place is that when we started as an NGO, there were not many NGOs at that time. We started the year 2000. And so wherever we identified there is a need, we were there, including health. So you mentioned health, for instance. As one of the results, I would say the negative outcomes of this change was that the Bedouin community state of health deteriorated very, very fast. And for instance, the Bedouin community started being introduced to new sicknesses like blood pressure, heart diseases, diabetes, and other diseases, because they changed their diets. Bedouins used to live, having very natural food. They used to produce their own food, milk from goats and sheep, milk products that they produce at home, and they would have everything natural as a natural food. Moving into the Western, economy, I would say, that changed reality for Bedouins. So they started relying more and more on sort of, I would say, artificial food, if you will, because it's a known fact all over the place, including in the States. Wherever you have poor communities that are consuming more unhealthy food, fat food, for instance, fast food, for instance, because it's cheaper. It's very easy to access cheaper food. And usually cheaper food is very, very unhealthy, to put it mildly. And that impacted the Bedouin community, so that we started seeing that for instance, the infant mortality here is 5 times more the average in Israel. That's one aspect. Secondly, every second woman on the Bedouin community age 40 or plus are at the risk of a diabetes because of change in realities. Okay. They tend to move around a lot less. They have less sports activities. They have more unhealthy food, etc. Okay, so the health of the Bedouin community deteriorated tremendously in recent years, and what we try to do is also increase awareness around that. So we have a wide variety of projects aiming at increasing awareness. Another aspect of it, home accidents, for instance. Bedouins moved from the tents into sort of modern or semi-modern houses, and especially on the recognized towns where they have electricity or they have running water and everything else. And we have seen that a huge increase in home accidents because people did not know how to do this sort of move and being prepared for this. So a lot of kids, for instance, will be either injured or could be even drinking, for instance, chemical materials that are used for cleaning the houses or whatever the case is. So we are now operating on a wide range of projects aiming at increasing awareness to the families, the young parents mainly. We have a shared project with a large organization called B'Terem in Israel, which is dealing with home accidents. And we're also getting some, by the way, funding from one of the major businesses in Israel called Kher. It's the Chemical Factories Association, and they're giving us some money to increase awareness in the different communities to prevent home accidents, to prevent all these cases where more than 70% actually of the kids that are actually going to the hospitals with home accidents are Bedouins, while the Bedouin community is 20% of the population, which is something that needs to be dealt with. So that's just to give you just several examples. For instance, in terms of women and health, we started the first sports center for women in the city of Rahat, which is a Bedouin city, with now more than 300 members, just for them to train and have a healthier lifestyle, healthier food, and everything else. And these women are becoming also a change agents in their own communities. They would learn what to do in this center, and they would spread the word in their own communities, which is, again, that's something that's great to do.
Sorry. So you have a plethora of in each segment so many different projects, but I want to be sure that we get to cover all areas. Can you name just some of the educational programs that you have going on?
Yes, we have a wide variety. As again, gap years, we have a wide variety. We're training young Bedouins to go into high tech, and so we provide them with a very very high quality program that prepares them for going to universities and colleges, studying science and high tech. We have same thing with young Bedouins who actually accessing health services, train them to go to all the different health topics, and go to universities and colleges and then find jobs, helping them find jobs. We have young leadership development programs called Sabil, which is the right way. Basically, what we train the young generation, the young leaders in this community to take over and change realities in the future. We are having a project called Jasur, or Bridges, where we train young educated Bedouin for high rank positions in government offices, because we believe in order to change reality, you need to change it from the ground, but also you need people on the decision-making level to change reality. So we're doing that as well. And these are just examples. We have, of course, the gap years, the other gap years that we in the different fields. In terms of youth, we have the youth organization where we take the 18, 19, 20 young people, train them how to become trainers of a younger generation. So you strengthen the ties between the younger and the older generations in this community. We have
if you could clarify, I just want to be sure that our audience understands what you're talking about when you say the gap year.
Gap years is a year when you finish a high school, 12th grade. We actually work with these young kids for a whole year, for 12 months, where we train them in a wide variety of issues, personal skills, finishing matriculation exams, and strengthening their Hebrew. Again, Hebrew is a very, very important skill that they need to master in order to go to higher education. So they would have 12 months of very, very serious training program, preparation program for them for the future. And we try to provide them with all the things that they missed on the high school level and during this year. They work hard. They come every day from 8 in the morning till 4:35 in the afternoon, and it's highly, highly supervised, this program. And the results there are amazing. 88% of those who go through these programs actually are going to the universities and colleges. And all of them find jobs later on. We keep very clear statistics just to make sure that we're on the right track.
And in terms of employment and economic development, what are some of those projects?
Well, again, that's very wide topic. Women's Weaving a Dream, that's the project that I mentioned. We mentioned in the short video, is that we are actually targeting women age, say, 25 to 40, on Bedouin neighborhoods that have never had the chance to finish either school or find a job. And we work with them in their natural environment. Our staff is actually working with them in their own neighborhoods and give them a lot of sort of life skills. And they teach them how to run a small business, and maybe teach them Hebrew a little bit of math and all the things that they need on the daily basis. And they will encourage them to open their small businesses. So our aim is, first of all, for them to be empowered enough to work, and secondly, increase the income of the families by them working. And that will help not just the woman to find a job and fulfill her whatever desires, but also helping the family. Educated mothers or working mothers will help their kids to be more educated, and they would have the means to do so. So by increasing the income, we're increasing the chances not just for the woman, but also for the whole family to have a better quality of life. Just one example. In terms of the health, just to mention that in some of the unrecognized areas, we're running ambulances, we're running rescue vehicles together with Magen David Adom, which is the Red Cross, I think, the equals to that. So we're running a shared project where we provide the salaries for the drivers and the team and these cars, and the Magen David Adom is providing the vehicles themselves. It was so successful. We did run this program for about 7 years. It was so successful that this summer, the government actually kicked in and they started to pay the expenses. So now we are free from, raising money to continue this project. So another attempt that was successful, that was adopted by the government.
Awesome. The Arab-Jewish partnerships that you have some incredible projects going on there. I loved hearing about your mayor's forum that you've been working on. Can you talk a bit about that?
Now you're touching more on the Arab-Jewish aspect of our organization, and I think just before that, I just would like to clarify something. That I said that at the beginning we were one of the only organizations, NGOs, operating in this field. And later on, we're quite happy about the development, because we started seeing more and more smaller NGOs rising on the field and specific areas. So we just finished about a year ago, less than a year ago, we just finished our strategic plan for the next 10 years. And we focused on 3 major areas. One of them is youth, ages from school to age 24. The other one is economic and social development. And the third one is the Arab-Jewish component, where when we talk about the Arab-Jewish component, we have several models that we developed so far. The one that you mentioned is the community year. That's what we call our project, the community year, where young Bedouins finishing high school would volunteer for a whole year together with a group of Jewish volunteers, same age. The Jewish volunteers are coming from different areas in Israel through the Scouts movement, and we are bringing the Bedouin young people into this project, and then they would work as pairs. They would volunteer for 2 days in the Bedouin community, 2 days in the Jewish community, and 1 day is training. They would touch on the issues that they would like to be more educated in. During this 1 day a week, we also introduce them to each other in terms of the culture, the background, the problems, the positive things in each culture. We're giving them an opportunity to learn for a whole year in depth about the other communities. And we found out that this experience is a life-changing experience. A lot of those, both sides, keep in touch, and they would also include their families into these circles. So this is one of our ways of creating this shared space. The other activity is what we call shared living project, where we get schools together to work together, not just for one encounter of coexistence, eating hummus together or whatever, eating together, but having a whole year of activities around something that is of interest to both sides. For instance, learning English is something that interests both sides. So we have groups of kids in schools, high schools mainly, that learn English together. So they get together around mutual interest, but they also have the chance to get to know the other side. Our aim is we have 52 schools that are actually in this project now, but our aim is we have 2 goals. One is for the government, to the Ministry of Education, to adopt the model. And secondly, to have a model that will make sure that kids are meeting from kindergarten to high school, all the way with the other. And that will give them the opportunity to get to know the other from firsthand, not through, as I said earlier, stereotypes or media, whatever the case is. So that's another aspect of our shared living. The third one is what you mentioned earlier, the Mayor's Forum. Because see, if we would like to change reality on the ground, we must include leaders into this process. We must include the councils, the municipalities, and all the different people actually work with the communities on a daily basis. So we decided to start the Mayor's Forum, which will be a mixed forum, both Arab and Jewish mayors, it would be led by two mayors, one Jewish and one Arab. In this regard, it will be the mayor of Beersheba, Rubik, and the mayor of Rahat, Faiz. They will be the co-chairpersons of this forum. And the goal of this forum is to identify regional activities that benefit both sides. For instance, if we talk about, for instance, Dimona, which is a Jewish city, and Arara, which is a Bedouin city, they can find regional opportunities for both either tourism or environment projects or any kind of project that benefit both sides. And we would encourage, by using the knowledge and using the resources, to encourage them to have these projects together. And that will create a situation where both communities can work, not just pass by each other, but work with each other.
You have so many projects and so much great work. We could go on forever. Unfortunately, we only have so much time, but I wanted to get your last question. If you could talk to the world, what would you want them to know about AJEEC NISPED?
AJEEC NISPED is trying to create an environment where people coming from different ethnic backgrounds and ethnic beliefs and different ways of life, bringing them together to work for the common good. If we are able to find ways of working on the common good, we will tremendously decrease the tension. We will create a situation where people can live in dignity, where people can feel safe, feel accepted, and also fulfill their potential. I mean, we have a huge potential here. If we live in a way that people help each other, we will fulfill our potential, and we will create a heaven here in this area. We will create a heaven that everybody from even abroad would love to come and live here, rather than living in this reality that we're living right now, where people are not happy and people are frustrated and people are sensing the lack of hope. We would like to change that, and AJEEC is the good example that it's possible. The 200 staff are mixed staff. The 500 volunteers are mixed volunteers, both Jewish and Arabs. So in other words, we proven that it's possible. And now we need to expand. We need to scale up. We need to go to different areas. And every person, every partner that is believing in this vision is more than welcome to come and be with us.
Well, terrific. That is a great way to end this wonderful conversation. Thanks so much, Kher, for sharing with us the incredible work you're doing, bringing together the Bedouin community with Jewish Israelis in peace. And next week, we'll be speaking with Phil Saunders, who works with Path of Hope and Peace. Path of Hope and Peace is a grassroots organization of Palestinians and Israelis, also dedicated to building coexistence through interdependent economy while fostering personal interaction and friendship between people and communities. Path of Hope and Peace's mission is to promote personal interaction between Palestinians and Israelis, and they advance joint private economic and social projects that create strong ties between different groups in the land. Their vision at Path of Hope and Peace envisions a land in which Israelis and Palestinians have built the trust necessary to live together with dignity, peace, and security. They would like to create many partnerships between the local communities also that share common infrastructures, environments, economies, and resources. Their goal is to strive to enhance tourism, ecology, science, technology, and cultural exchange. If you've missed any of our previous interviews, we hope you take some time to watch them at www.pennystee, like my last name.com, under podcasts, or at Peace with Penny, our YouTube channel. And for now, have a good week, and we look forward to you joining us. We hope you enjoyed learning with us, and may you live in peace, shalom, and salam.